Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Deputy President. Yesterday in question time, I asked the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong, a simple question. Exactly how many wind turbines, solar panels, batteries and kilometres of transmission lines were built last month? Now, you'd think that as the cornerstone of the Labor Party's policy in government, the answer would be obvious and clear and given to me straight away. To her credit, and I have a lot of regard for Senator Wong's capability, she's one of the most capable senators in Parliament, she said, "I don't know. I don't know." The key policy for the Labor government, and they're flying blind. Well, here's what I told her in the second question. Minister, the government's own figures to meet your net zero target show that over the next 8 years you need to install and connect more than 40 wind turbines a month, 22,000 solar panels a day for 8 years, 48 gigawatt-hours of batteries and 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines. And I pointed out to her that the government is building nothing like that. Nothing like that. The government's wind and solar pipe dream is going to be a nightmare. We're being driven off a cliff by the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen.
Order. Senator Roberts, remember to use the correct title.
Minister Bowen. This is a gargantuan task. This has been discussed, labelled by some people as the biggest transition since the start of the Industrial Revolution. The biggest. And it's fundamental because energy energy has primacy in our society. Labor cannot tell us the cost of this transition, dumping affordable, lowest cost, reliable, stable, secure energy independent of nature's vagaries, and transitioning to an unreliable, high-cost, unstable energy that is weather-dependent and not secure. This is madness. But to do it without any costing is doubly mad. Think about it. We are giving parasitic billionaires, we are giving major corporations from around the world, many of them from China, subsidies for installing solar and wind. Those subsidies drive up the cost of electricity and we ship our manufacturing to China. China wins in two ways. We have got a national electricity market forcing out coal with unfavourable regulations, just driving coal out by making it impossible to feed the market. But it's not a market, it's a so-called market. The bureaucrats control it. It's a national electricity racket that was introduced by John Howard's LNP government. And then while they're driving out coal and subsidising solar and wind, they now admit they need to keep Eraring power station open. They were going to shut it. So they're now offering subsidies to the owners of and operators of Eraring to keep it open. So we're subsidising to shut it and we're subsidising to open it. And then we're giving $275 relief for power prices to consumers across Australia. Why? Because the energy policy has failed. By the way, I need to mention that on the night of the incoming Minns government, the incoming Energy Minister said that they would have to look at Eraring, the closure of Eraring. She was laying a signal there, a hint that they'd keep it open. And that's exactly what they must do, because they're terrified. The Australian Energy Market Operator has forecast severe blackouts around December this year. The number one factor that's driven our standard of living for the last 170 years since the start of the Industrial Revolution has been relentless reduction in energy prices, the unit cost of energy, relentless reduction in real costs of energy, until John Howard's government introduced the renewable energy target and other measures, and it has relentlessly increased. Australia has gone from having the cheapest electricity prices, thanks to our wonderful coal assets, high-quality, clean coal, to now having amongst the most expensive electricity. So let's have a look at the terms of reference for the inquiry that Senator Colbeck has proposed, and I thank Senator Colbeck for his motion. That the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation GenCost 2023-24 report be referred to the Economics References Committee for inquiry and report to explore assumptions and costings made in the report, including but not limited to asset life cycles. The CSIRO has been criticised for every one of these things I'm about to read out: capacity factors, energy type costings, financing costs, fuel costs, augmentation requirements of transmission systems, data standards techniques and other related matters. CSIRO has been belted by experts on every one of these. We badly need this inquiry. This is the fundamentals of the biggest transition since Industrial Revolution. CSIRO used to be a highly respected organisation, internationally respected. It has now come to mean corrupted science is really obvious. Corrupted science is really obvious. It lost its way distorting and omitting science to fabricate support for the UN's climate fraud. The CSIRO has never presented the basis of science, which is empirical scientific data, measurements, observations, within logical scientific points that prove cause and effect. The CSIRO has been integral in working with the UN climate change body, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in pushing distortions of science. And to cross-examine, I've had 3 meetings with the CSIRO, 2.5 hours each. It has admitted that it has never said that there's been any danger due to human carbon dioxide. It has admitted, even though climate change was based initially on global warming claims, it has admitted that temperatures are not unprecedented. And it has claimed that the rate of temperature change is unprecedented. But the rate of temperature change is almost negligible since 1995. It's almost flat. That's according to NASA's scientific satellites measuring temperatures. The CSIRO gave us not one solid paper to back up its claims. What it did give us, 2 papers, we tore to shreds. Then they gave us another 2, we tore them to shreds. We have 24,000 data sets that I have access to that have been scraped from sites all over the world, including CSIRO, including BOM, including Goddard Institute of Space Studies. And there is not one that shows any change in any climate factor, not one. Just inherent natural variation with cycles superimposed. Not only that, the CSIRO has never provided the basis for policy, nor has any department. All the alphabet soup of energy agencies have all failed to answer my questions. What's the specific effect of carbon dioxide from human activity on climate? On any aspect of climate, any factor of climate. What is the quantified specific effect per unit of carbon dioxide from human activity? Temperatures, heat content, ocean heat content, air temperatures, ocean temperatures, storm frequency, severity, duration. A list. Not one of them can give me any answers at all. Not one. That's the basis for policy. Until that, you cannot understand the options, you cannot evaluate the options for reducing human carbon dioxide. And you cannot track the progress of the measures. And you cannot cost the alternatives. This is flying blind over a cliff. Electricity prices in every country with significant solar and wind have increased dramatically. Labor is simply continuing the policies that John Howard started, Tony Abbott continued, Malcolm Turnbull accelerated, Scott Morrison continued, and Peter Dutton now propagates by confirming net zero. Let's turn specifically to the CSIRO's report, GenCost. CSIRO used to be a respected scientific organisation advancing our country's technology, and I refer to Senator Fawcett's speech a minute ago. Now the CSIRO is a blatantly political organisation. It's more interested in pushing the agenda of the government than providing impartial, evidence-based research. Ideology is infecting most of CSIRO's work like a virus. The GenCost report is shocking evidence of just how biased this once respected institution has become. The methodology used in GenCost is so flawed there are multiple hours of podcast series to explain all of its deficiencies. And I compliment Aidan Morrison for some of his work. Let's start with the cost of wind and solar. Many people, including some politicians, think GenCost says what wind and solar costs to deliver a kilowatt of power today. It doesn't. It fundamentally doesn't tell us the cost. GenCost imagines some fairy tale dream time, half a dozen years in the future, and projects what they think wind and solar will cost, with no accurate, solid assumptions underpinning it. CSIRO even admits this prediction they come up with is not the actual cost. But this is what policy relies on. CSIRO completely excludes the cost of every single power project up until 2030. They're free. They're free according to this mob. Just look at the tens of thousands of kilometres of transmission projects assumed to be free. Energy Connect, $2.3 billion. Marinus Link, $3 billion. All assumed to be free, free. Santa Claus is giving them to us. Central West Orana, $3.2 billion. Hume Link, $5 billion. Doesn't sound like much when you rattle off billion, is it? Dozens more major projects. Then look at the pumped hydro that's assumed to be free. Snowy 2, $12 billion plus and counting. And that's not included. Not included. Battery of the Nation, Tasmania, our biggest island, $3 billion. Not included. Barumba pumped hydro, $14 billion. Not included. Pioneer Burdekin pumped hydro, $12 billion. Not included. The list goes on and on and on. Tens and tens of billions of dollars excluded from the cost of wind and solar. But we'll all pay for it. Some people with their jobs when they're shipped off overseas. Some people with cost of living driving them out of reach. Almost all of these projects, especially the pumped hydro, are only being planned because of wind and solar. Yet CSIRO excludes them from the cost of wind and solar completely. It's like saying a Ferrari is the cheapest car you can buy, so long as you take out the cost of the sunroof, the air conditioning, the wheels, the gearbox and the engine. Then there are their calculations on the cost of coal. They just add a 5% extra cost to the finance figures with no basis whatsoever. No basis. CSIRO just says, well, no one likes coal anymore, and whack, a completely unfounded hurdle is added on top. Then there's the capacity factor. That's the percentage of time the station is running. It has a huge impact on the calculated cost of power if you assume a $1 billion power station is only running for half the time it actually is on and can be on. They're destroying the cost of coal, the viability of coal, with lies. CSIRO also says, quote, in 2030 we project forward, including all existing state renewable energy targets, resulting in a 64% renewable share and 56% variable renewable share. End of quote. They just assume we're going to press ahead with variable renewable energy, regardless of what actually happens, without any costings, and yet they just assume it's going to go ahead. It doesn't sound like impartial modelling to me, because it's not impartial modelling. But the people of Australia will pay for this. They will pay for it with their jobs, they'll pay for it with their livelihoods, and they'll pay for it with their family budgets. What sensitivity have been applied for political risk? Policy will almost certainly change. And you may have a government elected that ditches forced targets. What percentage of chance do they give that? United Kingdom is abandoning net zero. The Prime Minister said so. Japan is switching back to coal, already using a lot of coal. Germany is scrapping wind turbines to extend coal mines, tearing down wind turbines that were installed so they can mine the coal underneath them. China is producing 4.5 billion tonnes of coal. We produce 560 and export most of that overseas. And China's buying coal from us. Indonesia is now the world's largest exporter of coal. India is well over 1 billion tonnes of coal. This report, the GenCost report from CSIRO, isn't worth the paper it's written on, yet is being used to justify one of the largest destructions of our economy in Australia's history. Even if you naively believe we need to run the grid on solar and wind, this report, GenCost, deserves scrutiny, and Australian people deserve transparency. CSIRO has repeatedly shown it is dishonest on climate and energy. We need an inquiry. In refusing or opposing, the government shows its assumptions will be shown to be flawed. And if I'm wrong, CSIRO would be vindicated. So CSIRO, if it had any courage, would stand up and say, bring on the inquiry. Thank you, Senator Colbeck. We support this motion.